while some of them make no decisions at all. As Timothy continues to fantasize about death, we learn what Gary's dreams are about, and we finally find out who robbed the hotel. There's a lot that we've got to discuss in the second following up with Rick and Frank at the Hollinger's house. As Jim introduces himself to Steve the director, who we see makes sure that Rick is doing okay and has his emotions under control. As they make some small talk and briefly talk about
a former prostitute. She's very formidable because she knows all the secrets of all the most powerful men in Thailand. She's tough, she's brilliant.
Meanwhile, we see Rick is trying to do his best and keeping his composure in line around Jim. Now this is cut between the monk talking about how anyone is capable of killing someone, but how the Buddhist scripture is against every form of violence. And a decision come to the finale that no one would expect from them in a violent point of view. Now the nighttime fun begins as Gaitak and Mook head out for their first date, and the Ratliff family make their way to Gary Gregg, and he believes that they should accept his invite and see what he has to tell her.
Look, if you don't go tonight, he's just gonna come looking for you again. I say we just get it over with.
He knows I know.
Mom, he's not gonna do
killed their wife, and I know I definitely wouldn't be okay with my kid being involved. Now, catching up with the ladies, they're out for dinner at the hotel as they learn that Fabian will be their entertainment for the evening. Now, it's pretty clear that there's an unrank, y'all, because he's really trying his best to be the fake director who claimed to have seen and studied Shatala's previous films, but man, Rick really screwed him over by not giving him much to work with. I mean, he could handle business in Thailand for all these years. Now, by the ease in which Jim agreed to have this side conversation with a complete stranger, at that point, I was certain that the Hollingers were fully aware that this. Then we see him sharing his experiences with doing business in Thailand and how when he was younger, he had to do these reckless type of things. He had this level of hunger and determination and how he didn't let things.
Ways to take care of that. I'm more careful now.
Now, it's pretty clear that there's two conversations going on within this scene. One, we have Jim, who doesn't really take much from the conversation they're having about business in Thailand. Sense of carelessness from his past that we can see is clearly affecting Rick. Now, as he's getting more upset, we notice that Rick is repositioning the gun from his jacket to his waist. Now, as the Rattlers arrive to the party, we see the episode. Now, Saxon continues to try to get Chelsea to like him as they talk for a bit, and here's where we finally get the backstory about how Chelsea and Rick first met, as she explains what she saw in him. Again, using the analogy of how the physical fight was shown and cut throughout the episode, here we learn that Chelsea is in her own fight. She's trying to fight for Rick's hope and happiness, but he can't seem to accept anything peaceful most of this season, and maybe we know people, or hell, maybe we are those people who have a similar mindset to where they think they can fix people that are dealing with their own issues. Now, personally, I find those and really getting to their actual core values will be a struggle. Again, I've been victim of that. I've played that game before and I failed at it. So now the question is, why even put yourself through it? She's going to lose that battle with Rick. And it could be more foreshadowing for him being the reason she could be this season's dead character. But let me know in the comments if you all can relate to Chelsea or if you got it in the comments below. Now, during that conversation, we see Timothy and Gary share a brief conversation, and while that's happening, we see Saxon watches from afar and watches his dad drinking as he pulls his dad aside to have a talk she believed that he was getting. He also tells her that he's not going to be a bodyguard either because he was told he's too soft and he doesn't have a killer instinct, and he seems to agree with that. He tells her how he didn't instinctually want to fight back during the on the other hand, shares how she believes the opposite and how it should be in his best interest to embrace the harshness of the world and that he shouldn't be afraid of using violence if it's needed in his job. Now, she seems to be disappointed that we've seen from Mook all season long, and just knowing how popular Lisa is in real life, I'm starting to think that the whole big shootout that we know is coming will most likely have her being a key part of it. In replace that, we got to see the polite gloves being taken off as Lori finally gets to the root of her problems about the Jacqueline situation, and she tells Jacqueline that the whole situation makes her not trust her. Now, Lori mentions help on Lori as Jacqueline calls her out for not allowing her life to get better, and she even talks about how she just accepts things without much pushback on her life, and we even see Kate throws in her 2 cents and she,
What are you doing it to yourself?
And You know, when you know someone long enough, you do start to see certain patterns. The source of your disappointment changes, but the constant is you're always disappointed.
Now, Lori's fake and she pretends her life is perfect. She also tells Jacqueline that she's vain and she's also selfish. Now, Lori's fed up with the both of them, and we watch as she decides to leave the table and she wants to head off to the fight instead of spinning the Victoria, and we get this here as she wants to be a hero and save the young woman she met back on the boat from the older man that she's dating. Now, Victoria offers to bring this young lady back to North Carolina with her. We see Belinda agrees to go inside to speak to Greg privately. Now, surprisingly, we see Greg finally comes clean to a certain extent about admitting to remembering Belinda and his ties to Tanya. Can't lie, this was a very smart move by Gary Gregg, a very smart move to make his problem a solution to Belinda's problem, as he offers Belinda $100,000 to finally star in her. That Greg is shocked that she didn't say yes to his offer. As Belinda finds her son and she wants to leave this party immediately, as we see Greg watches them from afar. So, question, if this was you and debts or whatever desire you have, are you taking that bribe or that hush money, or are you doing what she did and potentially risking him taking measures to ensure his secret is safe, which without their money? And now he gets another example, but this time it comes from his son, as Saxon wants assurances that everything at work is going okay, and if it's not, he believes he's not going to have anything else to offer him.
Into this basket. Into your basket, Dad. So if something's up, was something up?
Now, Timothy lies again straight into his son's face about what's really happening back home. Just adds more fuel to my theory that I shared in my last breakdown of Timothy convincing himself that by killing his family, he's doing them a favor by protecting them from what's back home. Now, back at the Hollanders, we see Peter Pan, as Frank says. Now, during this, we see Jim talks about how he spoils both of his daughters, as Rick finally comes clean about why he's here, and he goes into the first time he heard of Jim's name, Jim's face, and he moves closer to him. Now, Rick holds back from pistol whipping Jim, and we learn why he does that a little bit later in the episode, but he decides to flip the chair that Jim is sitting in, and he falls to the floor as we watch ever before in his entire life. Or he remembered her and didn't remember her having a husband, and this could point to the theory that a lot of you all have, which is that Jim is Rick's actual father. Now, another thing about for Jim to get his lick back on Rick eventually. Again, I just feel like Rick didn't think any of this over properly. Like, does he not remember that his girlfriend is currently staying at Jim's hotel and could easily get all of his information, director angle, and giving him little to no information to how he handled this Jim confrontation? I definitely think the third bad luck that Chelsea has been speaking of will come to fruition, and it's going to be about Jim being Rick's father. Maybe he deep down inside knows that this is his son, and maybe they're going to have a more peaceful confrontation, but things are going to go sideways because maybe Rick in attendance. Again, we see Mook is talking to Gaitak about the natural nature of humans to fight. While they're talking, we see that Lori is in the crowd and she's sitting next to Valentine, and we see his friends Vlad around, and he notices that Vlad was the same bald guy he saw from the robbery, and he pieces it together that Valentine must have had his head in the robbery as he distracted him, like I figured. Now the question is, what exactly will Gaitak do with this information? Will he bottle it up and take that to his grave, or will he have to tap into that killer instinct and he's going to confront them, or, as we'll discuss later, violent way? Now, as I've expressed in the past, I'm not the biggest Piper subplot fan of how they're handling it. It's just not as compelling to me as the other stories, but we do get a few scenes at the monastery in this penultimate within that subplot. We see the siblings settling in, and we see Piper hearing from Lachlan about what he thinks about this experience, and he thinks that it's all pretty great. Now, to her surprise, Lachlan tells her that he actually wants to stay words, and she's not all that excited about the news as she leaves her brother alone to leave him with his thoughts. Again, the whole Piper subplot has been my least favorite aspect of this season, but I do care about his sexual preferences. He's not sure about his beliefs, and twice now, he tried to go down the path that his brother was on, but he got rejected, and now he tried to go down the religious road with Piper, but there's a level of understanding that this 18-year-old, we've all been 18-year-old, we've all been kids not knowing what we want to do with our life, not to the extent of what we see in the show, obviously. But again, he's looking for guidance. Lost Ratliff member to another. Back at the party, we learn why Chelsea was a bit upset about Lachlan's absence, as she shares with both Saxon and Chelsea that her and Gary had a heart-to-heart about his very messed up.
He would then stand outside their door and just watch his dad go to town on his mom.
We learned that Greg Gary became obsessed with the idea that the women that he dated were cheating on, trying to tap into his childhood trauma. Whether it's Greg Gary or Chloe or Chelsea who's encouraging this to happen, which is just wild to me, but I got a good laugh out of that scene, one from Chloe from last week's episode. Now, ultimately, we see Saxon, at the moment, declines this offer as he decides to leave. Now, that reveal wasn't as crazy, nor as great or as wild as Frank's sexual. Now, speaking of Frank, we see him and Rick living in the moment, as Rick tells Frank how he couldn't even hit Jim because he wasn't this big bad boogeyman that he made up in his head to be, but instead he was just this old like they used to do back in the day. Now, back with Belinda, we see Zion encouraging his mom to take the money, but Belinda doesn't want to have anything to do with a murderer. Zion tries to remind his mom what she could do with that money, but more Belinda's position and her feelings on tying herself to a murderer, and knowing that she took money and that stayed on her conscience, and also who's to say by accepting that money that Greg won't end up holding that over her, or even worse, as we see Kate and Jacqueline aren't on the same page of what happened at the dinner with Lori.
It's fine. I'll be the bad guy. I'm used to it.
Now, admittedly, I know we still got the finale to look forward to with this particular plot with the ladies, but obviously it looks like that isn't the case, that we're going to be seeing both of those things happening in next week's episode. At least I hope that's the case. Now, after Gary's get together, we see Saxon keeps at it, and he wants to prove to Chelsea that and look, we know Saxon, he tries to be slick and he tries to make a move on her, but she peeps game, and she has him leave, and she remains loyal to her relationship with Rick, and she tries to call him, but yet again, in alcohol, and we see Rick is smiling. Now, was that smile from the whole situation that went down with Jim? Was that a smile about what he's currently doing? He's having fun with his friend, or is it a mixture of both? Before she leaves and gets smacked in the head and the face while doing so, while she was hiding in the closet, you all would notice that she saw a bunch of jewelry on his drawer. It's a pretty safe bet. Get it? Safe bet because of the robbery. It's like they are definitely playing these ladies the whole time and running some type of scheme to get money off of them. Now, the question is, did Valentine sleep with Jacqueline to get leverage over her? Will this be a situation where he's going to try to blackmail her? But we end this episode the same way we ended it before, where we see Timothy continuing to having dreams about killing his family by shooting both Victoria and Saxon dead before shooting himself. But I will admit, this time around with another way to end his and his family's life. Again, my working theory is that he's going to get those poisonous seeds that was spoken of by Pam back in episode 1 of this season, and they've made it a point in trying to kill them in the process. But I think, to make matters worse, I think he's going to make those smoothies for his family. He's going to offer it to his family, but at the very last minute, he's going to get a very important call. To that point, let's keep the tradition going. What I mean by that is, if you've been watching all my previous breakdowns for the White Lotus, I've always had a live watch party or a live reaction after the finale, and I was going to all watch together live, or you all would want me to host a live after show to discuss the finale, and then the following day I'll have a full breakdown going over everything. Vote which one you would want me to do. Still here at this point in the video, thank you so much for the continued support. Do me a favor and put in the comments right now, hashtag Piper no. If you all enjoyed this week's breakdown, hit that like button. Share this video. It is available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the different podcast platforms out there. If this is your first time, thank you again for watching. Hope you had a good time. Consider sticking around by either subscribing. All are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next breakdown.